Cowboy saw an Apache woman washing her clothes by the river and noticed her dress was torn to Pices. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the western sky in shades of orange and gold. The air was warm but carried a dry edge, the kind that made the dust of the plains cling to everything it touched. A lone cowboy rode along the narrow trail by the river, his horse's hooves clattering softly against the stones scattered along the bank. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that told of years spent on horseback, traveling under the endless sky. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his eyes, but his gaze was sharp, scanning the surroundings as if every tree, every ripple of water held a story. He had been on the trail for days, moving between settlements, searching for a place to rest his horse and refill his canteen. Water was always a precious resource in these parts, and the river's gentle flow promised not only refreshment, but a chance to breathe after a long ride under the blazing sun. The cowboy guided his horse closer to the bank, careful not to startle the creatures that might be drinking or hiding nearby. He had traveled this route before, but the wilderness always held surprises, and experience had taught him to stay alert. As he reached a bend in the river, something caught his attention. At first, it was just a movement, subtle and fleeting, like the ripple of water disturbed by a passing fish. Then he saw her. A woman, alone, bent over the shallow water, washing clothes with practiced, patient movements. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and she worked with a rhythm that suggested familiarity and resilience. But it was the state of her clothing that made him pause, his instincts sharpened by years of experience on the frontier. Her dress was torn in several places, hanging loosely and fluttering with the soft breeze that drifted across the river. The sight made the cowboy slow his horse, unsure whether to approach or keep his distance. The plains were full of dangers, and strangers were often wary of one another. Yet there was something human, something vulnerable about this woman that stirred a sense of responsibility within him. He watched quietly for a moment, noting her careful, deliberate movements. She seemed unaware of his presence, focused entirely on her task, scrubbing and rinsing with hands that were strong yet gentle. The water around her reflected the fading light, catching the fragments of color from her torn dress and scattering them across the surface like broken pieces of a painting. Curiosity mixed with concern as he continued to observe. The dress, torn as it was, told a story without words. Someone, or something, had left its mark. Perhaps it was the result of a struggle. Or maybe the harshness of the land had taken its toll on her belongings. Whatever the reason, it was clear she had endured hardship. The cowboy had seen people in difficult situations before, and he knew that appearances could speak louder than explanations. He also understood that offering help required caution. Not every encounter on the plains ended well. Still, something in her posture, the quiet dignity with which she worked, made him think that perhaps she could be trusted. He nudged his horse forward, the soft sound of hooves against sand and stone carrying just enough to alert her without startling her completely. She looked up quickly, her eyes wide and dark, reflecting surprise and a cautious awareness of the world around her. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the gentle lapping of the river against the bank. The cowboy tipped his hat in a gesture of respect, his voice calm and steady when he spoke. "Good evening," he said. "The water's clean here, and it looks like a good spot to rest for a while. Mind if I stop?" The woman studied him carefully. There was a brief hesitation, a moment when trust had to be weighed against instinct. Finally, she nodded slightly, not speaking, but allowing him to come closer. The cowboy guided his horse to a safe distance, careful not to crowd her, and dismounted with a practiced ease. He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible and relaxed. The tension in the air was subtle but unmistakable, a quiet acknowledgement of two strangers meeting in the wild, each aware of the fragile balance between caution and kindness. As he unpacked a small bag of supplies from his saddle, the woman returned to her work, though her movements were more deliberate now, as if aware that he might watch. She dipped a piece of cloth into the river, scrubbed it against a smooth stone, and rinsed it with the flowing water. The cowboy leaned against a nearby tree, observing without judgment. He could see the faint marks on her hands, small scratches that hinted at recent struggles. He thought about the miles he had ridden, the harshness of the land, and the endurance required just to survive from day to day in such conditions. After a while, he spoke again, choosing words that were simple and unobtrusive. "You've been working hard. This river's cold, but it helps with the heat." The woman glanced at him briefly, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and a quiet strength. She gave a small nod, acknowledging his words without offering more than necessary. The cowboy realized that she was guarded, not out of hostility but out of experience. Life on the plains, and in these unsettled territories, taught people to be cautious, to weigh every encounter carefully. He respected that, understanding that trust was earned slowly, not demanded. Desk. Minutes passed in quiet observation. The river flowed steadily, carrying away the small fragments of cloth that had loosened in the washing. Birds swooped low, calling to each other as the wind whispered through the trees lining the bank. The cowboy felt a strange mixture of admiration and concern. He admired her resilience, the way she continued her work despite the torn clothing and the evident hardships she had faced. He was concerned for her safety, knowing that the plains were rarely forgiving to those who traveled alone, especially women. Finally, he took a cautious step forward, offering a simple gesture. From his saddlebag, he produced a clean piece of cloth, small but enough to show goodwill.
"Here," he said gently.
"It might help a little. You look like you could use some." The woman paused, her hands stilling in the water. She looked at the cloth, then back at him. There was a flicker of hesitation, as if weighing his intentions, but then she accepted it, taking it carefully and folding it over her work. The simple act created a fragile bridge between them, a momentary acknowledgement that kindness could exist even in the harshest of places. As the sun continued its descent, painting long shadows across the river, the cowboy and the woman remained in a quiet rhythm, each aware of the other's presence but respecting the space between them. It was a subtle understanding, an unspoken agreement that this encounter, though brief, had significance. The woman's torn dress no longer seemed merely a symbol of hardship. It became a testament to endurance, to the ability to continue in the face of adversity. The cowboy, in turn, felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that even in the solitude of the plains, human connection could emerge in unexpected ways.
By the time the sky began to shift into deep purples and blues, the woman had finished washing the first batch of clothes.
Desp. She wrung them carefully, placing them on a flat rock to dry in the fading light. The cowboy, sensing that the day's light was slipping away, prepared to set up a small camp nearby. He offered a warm smile, one that conveyed no judgment, only the simple acknowledgement of shared humanity.
"Safe travels," he said softly, tipping his hat once more.
The woman nodded, a small smile touching her lips. A gesture of gratitude, subtle yet sincere.
It was not the end of their story, only the first chapter of an encounter that would linger in both of their memories.
The cowboy reflected on what he had witnessed.
A woman strong enough to survive the challenges of the land, yet human enough to need a helping hand at times.
The plains were harsh, unpredictable, and often unforgiving, but moments like these offered a rare glimpse of connection, trust, and quiet resilience. And as the night descended, carrying with it the sounds of flowing water, distant animals, and the whispering wind through the trees, the cowboy knew that he would remember this meeting long after the river had disappeared behind the hills, and the torn dress had faded into memory. It was a reminder that even in the toughest conditions, courage and humanity could shine through in the most unexpected ways. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the western plains, turning the sky from deep indigo to soft shades of pink and gold. The river sparkled under its first light, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves along the bank. The cowboy woke before sunrise, careful not to disturb the woman who had spent the night nearby under a makeshift shelter made of branches and blankets she had carried. He noticed her stirring, gathering her belongings, and preparing for the day. She moved with quiet efficiency, her hands still bearing faint marks of the labor from washing her clothes. The cowboy approached slowly, careful to show respect and not alarm her. "Morning," he said, his voice calm. "Breaths. Looks like the day's shaping up to be another warm one."
She looked up, her dark eyes cautious yet calm. "Morning," she replied, her voice quiet but steady.
There was no hint of fear, only the careful awareness of someone who had learned to survive on her own. The cowboy noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the way her shoulders were slightly hunched, how her hands occasionally clenched and unclenched. It was the posture of someone alert to the dangers of the world. He decided to speak gently, offering a simple question rather than an intrusion. "You've been through a lot," he said. "If you don't mind telling me, I'd like to know what happened."
"Maybe I can help." The woman paused, looking down at the river's smooth stones as if searching for words.
After a moment she spoke, her voice quiet but deliberate.
"I was traveling with my family," she began.
"We were moving through the plains when strangers attacked. They took what they wanted and left destruction behind." "My family. They are gone." "I had to run." The cowboy listened closely, his heart tightening at the weight of her words. The plains were full of stories like hers, yet hearing one so personal, so immediate, made it real. He could see the strength in her eyes, the determination to survive, the refusal to give in to despair. Yet he could also see the vulnerability, the human cost of living in such a harsh and unpredictable land.
"I'm sorry," he said softly.
That's hard. You didn't deserve that."
She nodded, accepting the sympathy without expecting pity. "I know," she said simply.
"I have to keep moving. I can't stay in one place for long." The plains, they don't forgive mistakes. He had spent years riding through these lands, witnessing the unpredictability and danger that came with it. He knew that survival depended on quick thinking, courage, and a careful eye on the horizon. Yet there was something different about this woman. She had endured a tragedy that would have stopped many, but she kept going, facing the world with steady resolve. He offered her a small gesture of help. "I have some food and water," he said, reaching into his bag. "You don't have to take it, but it might help until you get somewhere safer."
The woman hesitated, then accepted the offer, taking the small bundle with a quiet nod.
She didn't ask for more than she needed, and the cowboy respected that. There was a dignity in her restraint, a refusal to rely on others more than necessary. It reminded him that survival was not only about strength but also about wisdom and self-respect. They began walking together along the riverbank, moving slowly to avoid drawing attention. The cowboy stayed a step behind, giving her space while keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The plains were full of hidden dangers, wild animals, unstable terrain, and people who might not welcome strangers. The woman seemed aware of every sound and movement, her senses finely tuned to the environment. As they walked, she shared more of her story, speaking in fragments that revealed both the hardship she had faced and the skills she had developed to endure them. She talked about finding food in the wild, navigating the plains without maps, and staying hidden when danger approached. The cowboy listened, impressed by her knowledge and resourcefulness. She had learned to survive not through luck, but through careful observation, courage, and determination. At one point they came to a small grove of trees where the river widened and slowed, forming a quiet pool. The woman stopped and knelt by the water. dipping her hands in to wash the dirt from her face and arms. The cowboy watched silently, noticing the marks on her skin. Small cuts, bruises, and scratches that told a story of recent struggles. He realized that every mark was a testament to her resilience, a symbol of the battles she had fought to stay alive. I've traveled these lands for years, he said, breaking the silence. I've never met anyone like you. You're strong. You survived when most would have given up. She looked at him, a faint smile crossing her lips. Strength is not always about fighting, she said. Sometimes it's about moving forward when everything is against you. Or sometimes it's about knowing when to hide, when to run, when to trust. And sometimes it's just about not stopping no matter how hard it gets. Her words lingered in the air, carrying the weight of experience and the quiet wisdom of someone who had seen the harshest sides of life yet refused to let them define her. The cowboy felt a deep respect for her, not just for her survival, but for the grace and dignity with which she carried herself despite tragedy. They continued walking, the river at their side, the sunlight reflecting off the water in patterns that danced across their path. The cowboy noticed the careful way she stepped, avoiding loose stones and hidden roots. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, yet fluid, like someone who had learned to move in harmony with the land. After a while, they reached a small clearing where wildflowers grew in scattered patches among the tall grass. The cowboy stopped, suggesting they rest for a moment. Despa, 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 des. She agreed, settling on a flat rock by the water, taking out the small bundle of food he had offered. They ate in companionable silence, the sounds of the river and the wind through the trees filling the space between words. As they rested, the cowboy found himself reflecting on the fragility and strength of life on the plains. He had encountered hardship before, lost cattle, sudden storms, and the occasional conflict, but the reality of human suffering was different, more immediate. Sitting beside this woman, listening to her story, he understood the resilience required not just to survive, but to continue moving forward, to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming odds.
"Where will you go next?" he asked gently, curious but careful not to intrude.
She looked out across the plains, her eyes scanning the horizon.
"I have a place I'm headed," she said.
A small village. People there, they are kind. They won't judge me, and they can help me recover. I'll stay there until I'm ready to move on again. The cowboy nodded. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The plains were vast, and dangers lurked in every corner, yet he felt a quiet reassurance that she could handle it. She had survived so far, and he had no doubt she would continue to do so. They resumed their walk, moving slowly along the riverbank. The cowboy noticed how she observed everything: the birds, the animals, the patterns in the wind and the water. It was as if she read the land like a book, understanding its rhythms and secrets. He felt a growing admiration for her, not just for her ability to survive, but for the intelligence and awareness that guided every step she took. As the day progressed, the sun climbed higher, casting its bright light over the plains. The woman's torn dress fluttered in the breeze, a reminder of the hardships she had faced. Yet it also symbolized her strength, the ability to endure, to keep moving, and to face the world with courage. The cowboy felt a sense of responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but as a witness to her journey. He knew that every step she took was a testament to resilience and determination. By late afternoon, they reached a small hill overlooking the river. From this vantage point, they could see the vast expanse of the plain stretching out in every direction. The cowboy pointed out landmarks, a stand of trees, a distant ridge, the bends of the river, helping her navigate the next part of her journey. She listened attentively, absorbing the information with a focus that spoke of both necessity and intelligence. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the cowboy realized that their paths would soon diverge. C had a village to reach, a place of safety and recovery. He had his own journey to continue, moving across the plains in search of work, water, and shelter. Yet he felt a quiet connection, a shared understanding of the hardships and beauty of life on the frontier. Before parting, he handed her a small folded map, carefully marking a safe route along the river to the village. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it should help you avoid the worst of the dangers. Stay alert and trust your instincts." She accepted the map with a nod, a faint smile on her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "Your help, it means more than you know." As the cowboy watched her disappear into the tall grass, moving steadily toward the distant village, he felt a mix of admiration and reflection. He had witnessed courage, resilience, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. He knew that life on the plains would continue to test her, but he also knew that she had the skills, the intelligence, and the determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as he turned his horse to continue his own journey, the image of the woman by the river, her torn dress, her steady movements, her quiet dignity, remained with him, a reminder that even in the harshest of places, strength and humanity could shine through in the most unexpected ways. The sun hung high in the sky, its warm light casting long shadows across the plains. The cowboy had watched the woman disappear into the tall grass the day before, her movements steady and purposeful, but the memory of her strength lingered with him. He had thought about her through the night, wondering if she had reached the village safely. The plains were vast and unpredictable, and while he had offered help, he knew that danger still lurked in every corner. Meanwhile, the woman walked steadily toward the village, her mind focused on the path ahead. She had traveled far that morning, moving through narrow trails and small groves of trees that offered shade from the relentless sun. The torn dress she wore fluttered in the wind, a constant reminder of the dangers she had survived. Each step required careful thought, not only to avoid injury but to remain unseen by those who might pose a threat. She knew the land well enough to navigate its secrets, where the rocks hid snakes, where the grass concealed the footprints of other travelers. But she also knew that vigilance was never optional. Her journey was quiet, punctuated by the distant calls of birds and the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Every sound caught her attention, every movement made her alert. The plains were beautiful. But beauty could be deceptive. She had learned to read the land carefully, to understand the difference between danger and calm, and to move accordingly. Her hands, still marked with faint scratches from the previous day's struggle, gripped the edges of her bundle tightly, securing the few belongings she had managed to carry. As she approached a small grove near the river, she paused for a moment to rest and drink. The water was clear and cool, flowing over smooth stones that reflected the sunlight.
She knelt by the edge, dipping her hands into the stream and bringing them to her face to wash away dust and sweat.
Her movements were precise, practiced, and deliberate, revealing the survival skills she had honed over years of hardship.
She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and then continued along the trail, determined to reach the village before nightfall.
The cowboy, meanwhile, continued his own journey along the plains, though he couldn't shake the thought of her.
He had seen many travelers over the years, but few had struck him with the same mix of vulnerability and strength.
He wondered if she had reached the village safely or if she still faced unseen dangers. The image of her torn dress, her careful movements, and the quiet determination in her eyes remained vivid in his mind. It reminded him of the fragility of life on the frontier and the resilience required to endure it. Hours passed, and the woman's path led her into more open terrain. The grass grew taller here, swaying with the wind, and the sun beat down relentlessly. She moved with caution, aware that the open plains offered less cover and that any traveler or animal could see her from a distance. Her mind worked constantly, calculating the safest route while maintaining a steady pace. She adjusted the bundle on her back, shifted her weight to relieve the strain on her shoulders, and pressed on, Suddenly, a distant sound caught her attention. A low rumble, faint but distinct. She paused, crouching slightly behind a cluster of bushes, her heart racing. Could have been a herd of animals, or perhaps another traveler. Either way, she knew that caution was necessary. She waited, listening intently, letting the wind carry the sound to her ears more clearly. The rumble continued, growing slightly louder, and she realized it was moving along the same path she intended to take. Her instincts told her to hide, to wait until the source had passed. She slipped quietly through the tall grass, her movements smooth and deliberate. Her hands clutched the bundle tightly, her knuckles white with tension, yet her steps were careful, almost silent. The sun reflected off the grass, creating shifting patterns that helped her blend into the landscape. She moved like a shadow, aware of every detail in her surroundings, every change in light and sound.
As she continued, she came across a small stream that branched off from the main river.
She decided to follow it, hoping it would lead her toward a safer path and eventually to the village. The water was shallow but clear, revealing smooth stones beneath the surface. She walked along its edge, careful not to slip, and listened for any signs of danger. The plains were quiet here, but she knew that quietness could be deceptive. The cowboy, on the other hand, had stopped near a ridge that overlooked part of the river. He had been traveling in the opposite direction, scouting for water and a place to rest, but his thoughts kept drifting to the woman. He wondered if she had found safety yet, if she had been able to navigate the dangers of the plains alone. He had always respected people who could survive on their own, but he also knew that sometimes help made the difference between life and death. Back along the stream, the woman noticed something unusual. A series of footprints in the soft soil near the water. She knelt to inspect them, her eyes scanning the ground carefully. They were fresh, the impression still crisp, and they seemed to be moving in the same direction as she was. Her heart quickened, but she remained calm. She had learned that panic was a dangerous companion. Instead, she analyzed the prints, noting the size, spacing, and direction. They appeared to belong to someone traveling on foot, perhaps alone. She decided to move cautiously, staying close to the water's edge to mask her scent and presence. Her torn dress, though delicate and worn, allowed her to move quietly, its loose fabric brushing softly against the grass. She kept her eyes on the horizon, her senses alert, ready to respond if the unknown traveler drew near. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. She had learned that survival often depended on patience and observation as much as on speed or strength. As the day progressed, the heat of the sun intensified. The plains shimmered with mirages, and the air felt heavy with warmth. The woman paused under the shade of a lone tree, drinking from her water container and taking a moment to rest. Her mind remained focused on the journey ahead, thinking through every choice and every possible danger. But she adjusted the bundle on her back, tying it securely to prevent anything from falling out, and checked the condition of her torn dress. Though fragile in appearance, it had served her well, protecting her from the sun and brush. Meanwhile, the cowboy continued to ride along the river, scanning the area below for signs of life. He could see the glint of sunlight on water, the shadows of trees and the movement of animals, but no human figure appeared in his view. He slowed his pace, allowing his horse to graze briefly while he considered whether he should follow the path she might have taken. Though he was miles away, his instincts told him that the woman was capable, and yet he felt a sense of responsibility to ensure her safety if possible. The woman resumed walking, following the stream as it wound through the plains. The terrain became rockier, the path less defined, but she continued with determination. Every now and then she glanced back, checking for signs of pursuit, though she saw none. The sun began its descent, casting longer shadows across the land and bathing the plains in golden light. She knew that she needed to reach a safer location before nightfall. Darkness brought new dangers. Wild animals, unstable footing, and the risk of becoming disoriented. By late afternoon, the woman spotted a small grove of trees in the distance, a place that offered shelter and concealment. She quickened her pace, moving carefully but with purpose. The grove seemed to promise safety, a place to rest and gather strength before continuing to the village. As she approached, she noticed that the area was quiet, almost serene, with the sound of birds and rustling leaves providing a natural soundtrack to her journey. The cowboy, following a parallel trail along the ridge, noticed movement near the grove. He slowed his horse, squinting to make sure his eyes were not deceiving him by distance or light. He saw a figure, moving carefully, almost blending with the environment. Recognition struck him. He knew it was the woman. Relief washed over him, tempered by concern. He could see that she had survived another day, but the dangers of the plains were far from over. He decided to follow at a discreet distance, offering support if needed but allowing her independence. She had proven herself capable, and he knew that any direct interference could disrupt her rhythm and caution. From his vantage point, he watched her move with steady determination, her torn dress catching the light but not hindering her progress. But she seemed almost in harmony with the land, reading its cues, responding to its rhythms, and navigating the challenges with skill and intelligence. As the sun continued to lower, the woman reached the edge of the grove and paused. She scanned the area carefully, noting places where she could rest safely without exposure to potential dangers. She found a flat area beneath the shade of tall trees and settled her bundle carefully. Her eyes remained alert, observing the environment while her body took a brief rest. The cowboy, hidden among the trees and rocks, watched silently, impressed by her awareness and resilience. Night approached quickly, and with it came the coolness of the plains. The woman lit a small, contained fire for warmth and safety, its glow flickering gently against the darkening backdrop. She ate a modest meal, conserving energy for the next day's journey. Her movements remained deliberate and careful, even in the relative safety of the grove. The cowboy watched from a distance, satisfied that she had found a temporary sanctuary, and he knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities for her to demonstrate her courage and resourcefulness. The night was calm, with the soft sound of leaves rustling in the breeze and the gentle flow of the river nearby. The woman sat by her small fire in the grove, its warmth comforting against the cool air that had settled over the plains. Her torn dress, now drying in the fading light, reminded her of the hardships she had endured, yet it also symbolized her resilience and ability to survive. She ate a small meal quietly, keeping her senses alert to any movement around the grove. Every sound, every shadow had a meaning, and she had learned to read the land like an open book. Meanwhile, the cowboy had remained on the ridge, observing from a safe distance. He had followed the woman, careful not to startle her or intrude on her careful routine. Seeing her settle for the night brought him a sense of relief. He knew the plains were dangerous, that threats could come from the land, animals, or even other travelers, but she had shown remarkable skill and awareness. Her ability to move through such challenges with calm determination impressed him, and he felt a quiet admiration for her courage. As the fire crackled, the woman reflected on the events that had brought her to this point. Her family had been torn apart by violence, her belongings lost, and yet she had continued. Every step she had taken, every careful decision, had been guided by her instincts and the knowledge she had gathered from living close to the land. Her journey had not been easy, but it had strengthened her, teaching her patience, awareness, and resilience. She realized that surviving did not mean simply enduring. It meant learning, adapting, and continuing forward even when hope seemed distant. The cowboy finally approached the grove as dusk deepened, keeping low and moving cautiously. He did not want to startle her, yet he felt a responsibility to ensure her safety. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said softly, making sure his voice carried respect and care. The woman looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly at first in cautious assessment. Then, recognizing his familiar presence, she relaxed, allowing a faint smile. "You've been following me," she said, her voice calm, not accusatory. I wanted to make sure you were safe, he replied. The plains can be unforgiving, and I know you can handle yourself, but it never hurts to have a second pair of eyes. Breaths. Thank you, she said simply. I've managed so far, but I won't deny that your company has been reassuring. They settled near the fire, keeping a comfortable distance. The cowboy offered some dried meat and bread he carried, which she accepted. It was a small gesture, but it represented mutual respect and the quiet support that had grown between them over the past days. There was no need for words beyond what mattered. The firelight created a small circle of safety in the otherwise dark and uncertain plains. As night deepened, the woman spoke softly about her plans. Tomorrow I need to reach the village, she said. There are people there who can help me repair my supplies and rest properly. I've heard they welcome travelers in need, and I hope it's true.
I know the village, he said. It's not far from here, and the people are kind, just as you heard.
I can guide you to a safe route in the morning if you like, so you won't have to worry about hidden dangers along the way. She considered the offer for a moment, weighing independence against the practicality of guidance. Bask, finally, she agreed. All right, she said.
I'd appreciate it, not because I can't manage, but because any help that doesn't compromise my safety is...
welcome. The fire burned low, and they spoke quietly, sharing stories of the plains, of survival, of moments that had shaped them. The cowboy spoke of his years riding across vast lands, of storms, of encounters with both danger and kindness. The woman spoke of her family, her experiences traveling through wild and unpredictable terrain, and the lessons she had learned about strength, patience, and resilience. Their conversation was simple but meaningful, building trust and mutual respect. When sleep began to call, they rested, keeping the fire dimmed and controlled. The woman found a spot to lay, her bundle doubling as a pillow, while the cowboy kept a watchful eye for any disturbances. The night passed with the quiet sounds of the river and the wind, both of them aware of the fragile safety they shared. Morning came slowly, with soft light filtering through the trees. The plains were bathed in gentle gold, and the river sparkled in the distance. The woman stirred first, gathering her bundle and checking her torn dress, making sure everything was secured. She moved with careful precision, mindful of the ground and her surroundings. The cowboy rose as well, keeping a respectful distance, ready to guide her along the safest path. They began their walk together, the river on one side and the open plains stretching on the other. The path required careful navigation, as loose stones, small ravines, and patches of uneven terrain could easily cause injury. The woman moved steadily, her eyes scanning the horizon and the ground with equal attention. The cowboy walked a few steps behind, keeping a watchful eye while allowing her independence to guide the pace. Days. Along the way, they encountered small signs of wildlife, a family of deer crossing the distant hills, a rabbit darting into the brush, birds calling to each other from treetops. Each sight reminded them of the rhythm of the plains, the constant balance of life and survival. The cowboy admired how the woman observed every detail, how she moved as though the land itself spoke to her, guiding her steps and decisions. As they approached a bend in the river, the woman noticed the remnants of an old trail, partially hidden by grass and small shrubs. She slowed, examining the path carefully, then nodded. "This will take us closer to the village," she said. "It looks safe, but we should remain cautious." The cowboy agreed, guiding his horse along the safer edges of the trail while keeping a careful watch. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of the village in the distance. The woman's pace quickened, not recklessly, but with renewed hope that the end of this part of her journey was near. Her torn dress no longer seemed a burden. It had been a companion, a witness to her survival, and a symbol of the challenges she had faced. Finally, after hours of steady travel, the village came into view. a cluster of modest wooden buildings nestled among trees, smoke rising from chimneys, and people moving about their daily tasks. The woman paused, taking a deep breath, letting the sight of civilization calm her nerves. She had survived alone for so long that the sight of others, of a safe place to rest, brought a mix of relief and cautious optimism. The cowboy guided her carefully to the village entrance, ensuring they avoided any potential hazards along the approach. Villagers noticed them, pausing briefly before returning to their work. But there was no immediate threat. The woman's pace remained steady, her focus sharp. She had learned to navigate both the wild and human spaces with care, understanding that trust and caution must coexist. At the village center, they were greeted by a kindly elder who recognized the signs of travel and hardship. The woman explained briefly about her journey and her need for rest and repair. The elder nodded, welcoming her to the safety of the village. She exhaled, a subtle release of tension, and allowed herself to relax slightly. The cowboy watched quietly, pleased to see her finally reach a place where her strength could rest for a moment. Before parting, the cowboy spoke gently. "You'll be safe here," he said. "Take the time you need to recover and remember what you've learned from the land. You're stronger than you know." The woman turned to him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for today, but for believing in my strength and for offering help without taking it away from me." They shared a quiet moment of understanding, a connection forged through shared respect, danger, and the unspoken bond of survival. The plains had tested them both, but in different ways, and their paths had intersected at just the right time to offer guidance, support, and recognition of courage. As the cowboy prepared to leave, he cast one last glance at the woman, now entering the village with a sense of hope and determination. He knew the plains would continue to challenge travelers, but he also knew that her journey had been transformed, not because the dangers had disappeared, but because she had navigated them with intelligence, resilience, and the quiet strength that defined her. He mounted his horse and rode away, the image of the woman by the river, her torn dress, and her unwavering spirit etched into his memory. She had survived the wild, and now she had found a place to rest, to heal, and to continue her journey with renewed determination. And as the sun set behind the distant hills, casting the plains in soft golden light, the story ended not with finality but with the quiet satisfaction of endurance, courage, and the knowledge that even in the harshest conditions humanity and hope could shine through.